When I was younger and stupider and going to college in the North Georgia mountains, my friends and I would go night hiking a lot on the trails near campus. I got pretty familiar with the area and being out in the wilderness at night in general, which probably made me too confident. One night, the full moon was out and the weather was perfect, so visibility was crazy good. Everything was basically washed in dim blue light. I was feeling adventurous, and I love doing fun stuff alone, so I decided to go enjoy a night hike by myself. I took a flashlight, but this was around 2002, so no cell phone. I chose a super easy trail that was mostly flat, maybe a mile loop, in pretty secluded area. I didn't even need my flashlight for most of it. At some point, I started feeling uneasy, and maybe a millisecond later, I heard a man's voice. It was coming from a good distance ahead of me, somewhere off in the woods. He was crying. I'm honestly an empathetic person, and 99.9% of the time I hear someone crying, I want to comfort, help them in some way. But this time, I felt sick in the stomach, like a dry panic attack, if that makes sense. I remember coming very close to calling out to him, because my brain was trying to tell me he might be hurt, which was the only reason I hesitated. But it was like my body shut my voice down before I could say anything, and I knew I had to stay very quiet. He was sobbing like he'd just found out a loved one had died, but also gibbering, and almost babbling, like he was less than a person. There was a shrillness to it, under his crying, like he was holding back a scream, but perpetually, on and on, as if he'd been doing it all night. It's hard to explain, but I knew deep down he wasn't right in the head, and nothing good would happen if he realized I was listening. I went back the way I came. It was like I had tunnel hearing, and the only sound in the world was that crying. I was hyper aware of everything else around me, and beyond paranoid that I would snap a branch or snag my boot on something. Thankfully, it just faded the further I got from it, and I made it back to my car. Still, I was convinced some wild-eyed hermit was going to rush out of the forest and bite me to death, right up to the second I locked my doors and got the heck out of there. I finally had the rest of my panic attack on the drive back. I have never felt a shred of guilt about leaving that guy crying out in the woods in the dark. I'm convinced to this day I was in very real danger that night. Sometimes I get that same sick feeling deep down, whenever I wonder what might have happened if the moon had been less bright, or if I'd been more responsible, and I'd decided to use my flashlight even once. He'd have seen me for sure.